Be me, Evan, 35, operations analyst at a mid-sized logistics tech company in the US. My title sounds important, but it mostly means I babysit dashboards and angry clients. We sell logistics software that keeps warehouses from turning into detention fee bonfires. Our product isn't glamorous, but it prints money when it stays boring and predictable. Boring means trucks move, gates scan, inventory matches, and nobody is screaming into a headset. I clock in, fix small fires before they spread, then clock out and vanish into normal life. I'm not a star and I'm not dead weight. I'm the guy who keeps the machine quiet. Company's called Yardline, a name that sounds tough and means absolutely nothing. Clients are manufacturers and distributors who measure time and penalties and overtime. They don't buy vibes or mission statements. They buy uptime and answers at 2 a.m. for years we hit targets. Like it was routine because the system was stable and competent. The stability wasn't culture decks or inspirational posters. It was 3 people carrying the whole place. First pillar was Jake, enterprise sales, the guy who could close anything without raising his voice. Jake wasn't pushy. He was calm, detailed, and weirdly respectful, which made clients trust him fast. He remembered every plant manager's kid's name, every dock supervisor's temper, every weird contract clause. Multi-million accounts stayed loyal for a decade because Jake stayed consistent and never played games. Second pillar was Omar, operations architect. Quiet wizard nobody could replace even if they tried. Omar lived inside SQL, routing constraints, EDI flows, yard events, and all the edge cases we pretend don't exist. He'd vanish for days, then come back with a fix that saved 6 figures and prevented a lawsuit. Nobody could explain what he did in one sentence, but everyone felt it when he did it. Third pillar was Rick, sales director, the glue that kept the humans from tearing each other apart. Rick coached reps instead of threatening them, and somehow they performed harder because they respected him. He fought for commission plans, blocked exec nonsense, and kept morale from collapsing during bad quarters. Sales floor used to buzz like a sports bar, loud but healthy, sharp but focused on the work. Bonuses hit, promotions happened, and effort usually got rewarded like clockwork. I liked that life because it made sense in a simple, boring, reliable way. Then the founder decided we needed to modernize and update the company culture. We thought it meant better laptops, better coffee, and maybe less fluorescent lighting. We were wrong, because it meant a new head of HR with a plan and a grudge. Her name was Clara, and she arrived like a weather front rolling over the building. Perfect business, casual, polished smile, eyes that stayed in audit mode even during small talk. She introduced herself with the speech about people-first systems and building an inclusive, high-trust environment. Day 3, she sent a company-wide email full of corporate incense and soft threats. Equity, belonging, psychological safety, transformation, pay transparency, accountability, the usual sacred words. She promised a culture renewal and a rebalancing of outdated hierarchies that no longer served our values. I read it twice. Consultant smiled like a teacher handling a difficult student who just discovered math. She called his question defensiveness and told him to listen instead of explain. She said he was centering himself and resisting growth, which is a fancy way to say shut up. Jake, who negotiates 7-figure contracts for breakfast, went quiet and stared at the wall. Clara sat in the back nodding and taking notes like she was collecting evidence for court. After the workshops, the office felt colder, like humor got flagged as unsafe content. People started editing their words mid-sentence just in case a phrase became a case file. Clara didn't stop at workshops because Clara never stops once she smells control. She began appearing in meetings she had no reason to attend. Weekly sales meeting, she's there, silent, watching faces and writing in a black notebook. Operations review, she's there, asking what tone we use when we correct clients. Product planning call, she's there, asking about inclusive language in bug tickets. Then she launched an anonymous reporting channel called Clear Voice. Pitched as a safe space for concerns, it became a weapon that fired in secret. Complaints started popping up like weeds after rain, small at first, then nonstop. Sales team too loud and intimidating for quieter colleagues. Jake too competitive and monopolizing high-value relationships. Rick too hierarchical and reinforcing outdated leadership models. Omar unapproachable and gatekeeping knowledge by not being chatty enough in meetings. None of it was actual misconduct, but it was written in policy language that scares executives. Clara held pattern review sessions where she never named anyone directly. She just described behaviors and watched people glance at the usual suspects. She asked leading questions and let silence do the threatening for her. Then she aimed at money, not revenue, not margins, but employee pay, like it offended her personally. She requested payroll data, commission structures, bonus histories, and role descriptions for equity analysis. People whispered she was running a compensation audit and hunting for targets. I didn't fully care until I saw her walking into the CEO's office, carrying charts like weapons. Our CEO was Howard, spreadsheet guy, disconnected from the floor, fluent in numbers and empty reassurance. Howard wasn't evil, he was just absent, like a manager installed for investor comfort. Clara spent a lot of time with him behind closed doors, and the vibe got worse every week. Then she scheduled a leadership meeting called Compensation Imbalance and Cultural Stability. The recap slid into my inbox because operations gets dragged into everything. First slide was a pay distribution curve with the nasty spike at the top. That spike was Jake, Rick, and the senior enterprise reps who printed money and kept the lights on. Clara boxed the spike in red like it was a crime scene. She said the gap created resentment and a toxic power imbalance. She said some roles were rewarded for visibility instead of contribution. She said sales coasts on relationships, while others do real labor in the shadows. She called commission culture an ego machine that undermines collaboration and psychological safety. She said reliance on a few high earners creates a single point of failure, which is true but dishonest here. Howard saw one thing, and the thing was payroll cost he could reduce without understanding consequences. He nodded like she was showing him free money hidden inside moral language. Clara didn't say Jake is bad. She said roles like his distort incentives and invite entitlement. She didn't say Rick leads. She said legacy hierarchy persists and reinforces inequity. She didn't say Omar saves us. She said knowledge silos are harmful and exclusionary. It was corporate language, but it moved like a knife. After that meeting, the mood shifted from annoyed to terrified. Sales floor went quiet, like someone turned down the volume on the whole building. Slack got sterile, jokes died, and every email sounded like a legal document. Jake still worked, but his calm looked strained, like someone watching a storm approach. Rick started having closed-door talks with his team. Omar got quieter, which was his version of packing a parachute. Then came the restructure, announced like a new feature release. Clara emailed about streamlining for equity and sustainability. It promised reduced dependency, flatter hierarchy, and balanced compensation structures. It did not mention layoffs because honesty never survives the approval chain. The day it happened was a Thursday, because layoffs love Thursdays. Security badges started failing for specific people, one by one, like a quiet execution. HR assistants escorted managers to conference rooms with the casual speed of habit. First they called Omar into a room and my stomach dropped. He stood up, grabbed nothing, and walked out with a blank face. 10 minutes later, he came out pale like someone drained the color from him. He didn't return to his desk. He walked straight to the exit and left. Next, they called Rick, and the sales floor held its breath. Rick walked in steady, like he refused to donate panic to their narrative. He came out looking older, glanced at his team, and gave a small headshake. That headshake hit harder than any announcement email. He packed fast, hugged one rep quickly, then left with his box. Then they called Jake, and the office got that dead quiet where even keyboards sound loud. Jake went in calm, which somehow made it worse. 15 minutes later, he came out angry, jaw tight, eyes burning but controlled. He walked toward Howard's office, found the door closed, paused, then turned away. He grabbed his laptop and walked out without looking back. Later we got the line. Positions eliminated in restructuring. Everyone knew those positions weren't eliminated. They were removed for being expensive and male. Half the senior sales team went too, mostly top earners, mostly guys with accounts. Clara never said the pattern, but the pattern set itself across empty desks. Empty desks looked like missing teeth, and the office felt hollow. The next day, Clara called an all-hands meeting. We filed into the same room like we were attending our own funeral. Clara stood at the front smiling like she'd launched a successful product. She talked about a new chapter, a healthier workplace, collaboration over ego, and purpose over pressure. She said we were finally free from aggressive growth mindsets that harmed people. Then she announced replacements were already hired, because speed matters when you're covering tracks. Fresh grads, young reps, junior marketers, bright eyes, empty context, loud confidence. She called them a balanced cohort, bringing diverse perspectives and modern energy. To celebrate, she said, we'd have a welcome party that afternoon. At 3 o'clock, HR rolled in sheet cake and plastic champagne flutes. The cake said new chapter in bright pink icing like a warning label. Clara toasted to equity, sustainability, and bold futures. New hires cheered like they were at orientation and didn't notice the corpses. The rest of us stared at empty desks and cheap frosting in silence. It felt like watching a captain throw the navigator overboard and clap on deck. Monday after the purge felt like walking into a different company. They were busy being visible, which Clara treated as productivity. Meanwhile, Jake's old client line rang like a fire alarm. Calls got forwarded to a new rep named Ashley with a script and a smile. Ashley introduced herself with buzzwords and promised partnership and synergy. First caller was a plant manager from Ohio with a voice like gravel. He asked why his custom integration wasn't in the system and why shipments were late. Ashley didn't know what he meant because she couldn't. Jake's accounts were a maze of exceptions, history, favors, and trust. The manager asked for Jake by name like he was calling a friend. Ashley said Jake was no longer with the company. The manager went quiet, then asked who actually knew their setup. Ashley put him on hold to ask her supervisor. There was no supervisor who knew because Omar built half that setup, and Rick managed the humans around it. Client hung up, and an hour later we got an email. They were pausing orders until we confirmed operational continuity and assigned a credible owner. That was the first domino, and it fell loud. By Friday, more accounts requested holds and escalations. Support tickets tripled because clients noticed small issues we used to prevent. Clara's response wasn't to understand the clients. It was to coach Ashley on confidence. She said the old client relationships were unhealthy and based on favoritism. She said clients should respect the brand, not individuals, like we were selling sneakers. Then marketing started collapsing because Omar's strategy was gone. His models and roadmaps were locked behind access controls nobody had. Clara appointed an interim marketing lead named Priya. Priya was smart but new to B2B logistics and allergic to unglamorous details. She called Omar's approach stale and overly technical. She pushed brand storytelling and human-centered messaging. Our campaign became stock photos of smiling people in hard hats. Captions were vague lines about building the future together. We got likes from employees because engagement became a soft requirement. We got almost no qualified leads because buyers wanted proof, demos, references, and reliability numbers. Pipeline went from fire hose to dripping faucet. Sales reps started cold calling from outdated lists like it was 2009 again. Without Rick, the sales team lost structure, coaching, and protection from exec tantrums. Remaining senior reps updated resumes quietly and disappeared into competitor offers. Every week another desk went empty and no one said goodbye out loud. She said misaligned people leaving was progress because she confuses obedience with alignment. Our quarterly numbers started looking like a cliff. Finance meetings got tense because math doesn't care about transformation speeches. Clara insisted the dip was misleading and part of a strategic shift. She said we were shedding toxic revenue and building sustainable value. Howard repeated her phrases like he was trying to convince himself. Outages lasted longer because the team was understaffed and institutional knowledge was gone. Each outage triggered an escalation, and escalations became routine. Clara said escalations meant we needed more empathy training. She scheduled mindfulness sessions during peak incident hours. I sat through breathing exercises while our uptime graph bled red on the wall screen. Then the rumors started, whispered near coffee machines and printer corners. Someone saw Jake having lunch with a competitor's VP downtown. Someone saw Rick posting about an exciting new chapter on LinkedIn. A junior engineer said Omar updated his headline to co-founder. The name was Harbor Ridge Consulting, and I felt my stomach drop again. My brain connected it before my mouth did. Jake, Rick, and Omar didn't just find new jobs, they teamed up. They built a firm selling what they always sold, competence and trust, without Clara's circus. For the veterans, it felt like oxygen after months underwater. For Clara, it became a conspiracy with villains and sabotage. She accused them of poaching and retaliation in a manager meeting. She framed herself as the victim while the company collapsed behind her. The final act started with our biggest client, Granite Automotive Group. Granite wasn't just a client, they were our life support. Their contract was worth more than our next 10 clients combined. Renewal season used to be Jake's masterpiece, and everyone knew it. This year, Clara's team emailed a standardized renewal form like it was a gym membership. They sent it to the wrong contact, then followed up with cheerful jargon. 2 weeks passed with no response, and panic leaked into meetings. Clara assigned the renewal to Ashley because Clara loves optimism over competence. Ashley called Granite's main line and got stuck with the receptionist. She couldn't reach the decision maker because she didn't know his name. She finally got a purchasing manager on the phone. He asked a technical question about integrating yard events with their new WMS. Ashley froze because she didn't even know what WMS stood for. She asked him to hold while she Googled. He hung up, and the call ended like a guillotine. 3 days later, a courier delivered a package addressed to Howard personally. The receptionist carried it like it was radioactive. Howard opened it, and something in him changed instantly. He stormed out holding a single letter and a thick financial report. He marched toward Clara's glass office where she met with brand consultants. They were reviewing color swatches for letterhead because of course they were. Clara saw Howard approaching and smiled like she expected applause. Howard opened the door hard enough to make the glass rattle. He slammed the letter down, scattering pastel samples across the table. He slammed the financial report beside it like a verdict. He pointed and said, "Explain this." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the dead quiet office. Clara picked up the letter and her face drained in real time. It was Granite terminating the contract effective immediately. The last paragraph was the killer. They were transferring the entire account to Harbor Ridge Consulting. It named Jake as their trusted partner and called his expertise indispensable. Clara started speaking fast like speed could build a defense. She said it was coordinated, unethical, and rooted in bias against her leadership. Howard let her talk for 30 seconds. Then he raised a hand, and Clara went silent like someone hit mute. Howard leaned forward and spoke low, like ice. He said he built the company on results, trust, and relationships. He said he trusted fancy language over operational judgment and paid the price. He said she didn't modernize the company, she dismantled it. Then he used her own HR language like a weapon. He said her leadership created a toxic and unproductive work environment. He said her performance did not align with strategic goals. He said it was a fundamental failure to perform her duties. He told her to pack her belongings and security would escort her out. Clara's confidence evaporated, and her face folded into numb shock. 2 security guards appeared and stood politely by her door, like they were trained for this moment. Clara packed her things into a box with shaking hands. As she walked out, the office stayed silent for a beat. Then someone started clapping, slow and steady. Another joined, then another, until it became a dull roar. It wasn't celebration, it was pressure releasing from months of swallowed anger. But consequences were already locked in. Granite leaving triggered loan problems, supplier pressure, and cash flow pain. 2 months later, Yardline filed for bankruptcy protection. Assets got sold, teams got scattered, and the office emptied like a drained pool. I lost my job like everyone else because that's how these stories usually end. Except this one had one more message waiting for me. About a month after the layoff, my phone rang on a Tuesday morning. It was Rick, and he sounded like himself again. He said Harbor Ridge was expanding and asked if I wanted an interview. I showed up to a small office with cheap desks and serious energy. No workshops, no slogans, no culture sermons, just problems, solutions, and accountability. Jake was on a call negotiating real terms with a client who sounded relieved. Omar was at a whiteboard mapping processes like he was drawing a battle plan. Rick walked the floor coaching a new rep with patience and precision. They didn't build a revenge story, they built a better machine. I got hired, and for the first time in months, my shoulders relaxed. 6 months in, we closed a deal bigger than anything Yardline closed all year. That afternoon, Rick poured drinks and looked around like he was counting survivors. He didn't give a speech because speeches are for people who don't work. He raised his glass and said 2 words that felt like a promise. To merit.